Hello, this is Dan from WEA Records, and we're going to do something a little bit different today. I had this idea of doing cheap records and cheap beers. Now the concept behind this is we each get to choose a record each time we do this, and it can be no more than £5 in value.
So we've had to go out and buy records for this.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
So Tim's going to do the first one. So the rules are, Tim, you can pick a record up to £5, so second hand, obviously.
So that includes buying it online, but not.
Yeah, you can get it online.
Well, I did. So yeah.
Okay, we're not including postage,
Yeah.
so obviously, But so Tim's picked the first record today, and the beer that we're going to have has to be £2 or less.
Okay.
Okay, cheap beers. So do you want to just tell us which album you've picked for today?
So I've gone with Dollar. Because this is right within our wheelhouse, isn't it, Dollar? Wouldn't you say?
I mean, it's a great album to start with.
It is. It's something. Well, I mean, this was a relatively well-known album, I suppose, in the early '80s.
Yes.
This was probably their most successful album. This is Dollar's third and final album from 1982. It's called the Dollar Album. It cost me more than $1. It cost me $4.99 actually from Discogs.
Excellent. $4.99.
So it's just under our rule for £5.
So I've picked some beers for today.
Okay, so you've done both the beers, haven't you?
You're much of a beer drinker, Tim? You used to be a cider drinker, didn't you?
I used to be a cider drinker, and now I just drink I just drink things that aren't fizzy, so I just drink ale on the whole.
Ale, okay.
Yeah, I don't really drink lager as such, so this is a Pilsner.
So this is a Lidl special, Perlenbacher.
Perlenbacher. I have had a Perlenbacher before from Lidl.
This is their Pilsner version. I think there's a couple of different versions that they do in there.
Yeah.
I bought a 4-pack of this, and I think it cost just around £4.90.
Okay, so that makes them what, £1?
£1.20, £1.30 each a can.
Yeah.
I mean, it may be around that mark, but it's definitely nowhere near £2.
So it's under your £2.
I'll let you pour it yourself, because I've got quite. I like a big head. On my
Is this
on my beer.
going to be quite fizzy? I'm saying.
It's a Pilsner.
Okay.
So yeah, it could be. Apparently, this is brewed according to the German purity law, which is always good. Is it brewed in Germany?
Perlenbacher. I guess it's brewed in Shepton Mallet.
I have had this before, and it's, for me, I think it's quite a decent.
Brewed in France using non-UK barley and water.
Okay, and obviously the German purity law is you can't use more than those 4 staple ingredients for a beer. I think is it barley, water, yeast, and hops? Is that what it is?
I believe so.
Anyway, we'll crack these open.
So 4.5%. This is stronger than what I would usually go for of an ale. Yeah. Well, I tend to, if I go out drinking, I tend to drink a lot. So I try and drink stuff that's
you can drink
3% and above. No more than 4% really. I wouldn't drink like premium lagers or anything now that are 5%.
Yeah, to be fair, you have a much higher constitution than I do.
Maybe not so much these days.
Oh, you still do. I
tend to fall over a bit now.
You can drink me under the table anytime. I'm a lightweight, but I do like a beer, and I like this beer because it's nice and clean. But
it's very very light looking.
Kind of straw coloured, isn't it? Very carbonated.
Very carbonated. Yeah.
Nice head on that. Aroma, Tim?
Smells like cheap beer, I'd imagine.
It's very fresh, isn't it? Very clean.
Yeah. A little bit chemically. But
Do you think?
Yeah, a slight hint of chemicals.
For me, I just think it's very. It's not very. It doesn't have loads of character. It's very clean beer as far as I'm concerned. But we're not. We're certainly not experts in alcoholic beverages. But I know what I like. Anyway, so this is our beer for today. So cheers.
Cheers. Do you know what? That tastes different to what I expected from smelling it. It does taste quite. It's not sharp, is it? It's got a kind
of. A bit peppery, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's not a bad aftertaste.
But it's
I'm not too big on my ales. You see, for me, some of them can be too hoppy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this kind of, it's got enough carbonation, but it's not ridiculous.
Mine's certainly very lively. These glasses clean.
Well, no, it's because they're was it crenellated on the bottom?
Yeah, I see.
So they'll probably go through their carbonation quite quickly in these glasses. But anyway, yeah, not a bad beer for under £2. It's probably a good buy, that.
So if you've got a Lidl near you, let me check out Perlenbacher Premium Pilsner, which is good alliteration as well.
So let's get down to the brass tacks.
Dollar. So the reason that I bought this...
Yeah, why did you buy that?
I actually do quite like Dollar. Songs here and there in a sort of cheesy pop MOR kind of way. But the reason that I like this is I've got props for this. This is great. Trevor Horn, the Buggles. This is the second Buggles album. So this was the album that he was working on pretty much around the time that he got the job to do this, or some of this anyways, we'll talk about for Dollar. Everyone knows the first Buggles album because it's amazing.
Video Killed the Radio Star.
The Radio Star, yeah. This one's great as well. This is almost a Trevor Horn solo album because the other chap departed to, I think he was involved with like Yes and Asia and bands like that at the time.
What was his name?
Pass. Yeah, it was on the tip of my tongue, and then I've now forgotten it. But yeah, the other guy who wasn't Trevor, who was in the Buggles with him, has pretty much gone at this point. So this is Trevor's kind of solo Buggles album.
Okay,
it's got some brilliant stuff on it. But yeah, he got the call to.
So he's obviously a very clever production engineer.
Yeah, well, in my
ahead
opinion,
of his time.
In my opinion, he pretty much invented the 80s sound.
Yes.
When it comes to the 80s.
So you went on to where was it ABC and?
We'll get there. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, jumping the gun.
So in 82, well, I'm guessing probably at the end of 81, I think some of these songs were from there. He got the opportunity to work with these lovely two. So this is Teresa Bazar and David Van Day.
So they met in the pop group Guys and Dolls.
Yeah, in the 70s they were.
So I don't remember him being in that, but so was he more of a background performer?
So yeah, I don't really know a hell of a lot about Guys and Dolls.
I've watched a few videos and the
she's quite prominently featured.
She is. Yeah. There's another chap who was did a lot of the songs. Mm-hmm. Good looking chap from the 70s. I believe he died like a year or two ago. So was he disillusioned with that and wanted out?
Yeah, well, they were a couple at the time.
Yes.
So they basically...
So David Van Day we're talking about.
David Van Day. They went off to do their own thing, which became Dollar and became the first Dollar album.
Oh, God, he's got that as well.
I haven't got those three. I haven't got the second one.
How much did you pay for that one?
Now this, I bought brand new.
Did you?
Quite recently, actually. It's a reissue on Cherry Pop from 2019. I think it's coloured vinyl.
That's true. They re-released it.
So re-released it. This album's weird, and it doesn't really sound. This like the pop on here is perfect 80s sparkly pop. This stuff
this looks very
more,
70s. Doesn't it?
It's kind of more 70s, a bit more MOR, and very, very strange. There's no real hits on there.
Yeah.
They did do a second album, which I think is called the Paris Collection. I think.
Yes.
Which didn't really do. Neither of these two really did anything. It wasn't until they got to here and they got Trevor involved.
So how did they convince Trevor Horn to produce them?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I've got Trevor's book, Adventures in Modern Recording, which runs through his whole career. He wrote this himself. It's a very interesting read if you've got any interest in music production, because he talks a lot about the techniques that he uses to get the certain sounds and things. This album was the first album he went. Well, I say album. He only did 4 songs on it, but they're the 4 best songs on the album.
So could they just not afford him for the rest of it?
So he says in the book at the end that he's a chapter on Dollar. and he kind of says that he thinks that it was a bit too expensive for them,
Right.
because he was spending so much time. He just got the Fairlight CMI, the electronic sampler and synth that Kate Bush used a lot around this time on the Dreaming. So he kind of used it a lot. You can really hear it on some of the tracks on here. A lot of those vocals that you hear, like there's Teresa's like airy sounding,
It's very
light
sputty
vocals.
It's
They're all sampled and run through a Fairlight 100 times to give it that kind of.
There's layers
sound,
and layers of vocals,
which is very much the Trevor Horn way. Yeah.
Now, this is the first time I've listened to this album.
Yeah.
Actually, all joking aside, because I know Dollar are a bit of a joke in some circles. It's a very sparkly, lavish sounding record, and
those 4 tracks in particular.
Yeah. So is it?
Can you hear the difference?
Is it track 1, 2, 3, and something else?
Yeah. So, Mirror Mirror,
Yes.
Give Me Back My Heart, and Handheld in Black and White. Those are like the most well known.
Yeah.
Those are all Trevor Horn.
And that's my favourite, Handheld in Black and White.
That's my favourite as well. I love that.
And what was the other one? Sorry.
Videotech, which is on side 2.
Yeah.
That's that was a single as well. All 4 of the Trevor Horn produced ones were singles, and they all went top 20, I think.
Right.
Mirror Mirror, is it Mirror Mirror or Handheld? What went like number 4 or number 5? I think quite high up in the charts anyway.
Now, and
the album didn't do so well.
So is it Teresa
Bizarre?
Teresa Bizarre. So she was very. She was watching what Trevor Horn was doing.
Mm-hmm.
She's very interested, and she basically produced the rest of the album.
Yeah, I think it's credited to Dollar, isn't it? In the
I think
credits
yeah.
on here, but I think
from what I've learned, she
I
was
think
very instrumental in the production
took
side.
Yeah, he mentions that in the book as well.
Right.
And there's a section where that she was watching what was going on in the studio. Here you go. Dollar themselves were great. True to their word, David and Teresa didn't get under my feet. Teresa was interested in the production process, but even so, neither of them hung around much. And although it was obvious that there was a history between them, and maybe even, dare I say it, a bit of bad feeling, they always behaved with the utmost professionalism. I know that David has acquired a bit of a diva reputation in the intervening years, but he wasn't like that with me, though. So, yeah, ever since he's become a bit of a joke, I guess, hasn't he, in some circles.
I wasn't really aware much of Dollar, to be honest, until that
the Bucks Fizz stuff.
The Reborn in the USA.
Oh, yeah. So that was like
that?
2005.
Where he had that huge row with Sonia.
Yeah. Yeah.
he came across. I mean, to be honest, Sonia came across badly as well, but he came across really badly in that, and I ended up feeling really sorry for Teresa.
Yeah.
She you could tell she was just embarrassed by the whole thing.
Yeah, she's kind of had herself dragged back to Dollar a couple of times by David Van Day, because they split up after this album. And then in '86 they got back together. I think he basically insisted they got back together. And we weren't even a couple at this point.
When they did that Ola Moore song.
Years. Covered Erasure's Ola Moore, which was a big hit for them.
It was a big
like
hit,
number
yeah.
7 or something.
It did really well in Europe, didn't it?
It did, yeah. And then couldn't follow it up and then drifted apart again. And it wasn't until the 2000s period.
Yes.
He tried to relaunch Dollar a few times in the 90s with various women singing with him. And he was running a burger van, because I remember the headline, I think it was in the Sun, Burger Van Day. He was running a burger van in Brighton and then trying to relaunch Dollar.
And the whole Bucks Fizz.
And then the whole Bucks Fizz thing, which is a whole other
I ended up rewatching that on
goodness.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Was it called Trouble at the Top?
Trouble at the Top, yeah.
Oh my god.
I've not seen that for a long, long time. You watched it recently, have you?
I watched it yesterday.
Oh right, okay. Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. It's TV gold. If you ever get a chance, it's so funny.
We'll link to it in the.
It gets so convoluted. All the different iterations of the band, and David Van Day obviously ends up leaving the version of Bucks Fizz that he was with. Is it Bobby G?
So he wasn't it Mike Nolan? He joined first.
No.
Yeah, he joined Mike Nolan's Bucks Fizz in the '90s, late '90s.
No.
And then Bobby G sued.
No. He was he joined Bucks Fizz with Bobby G.
Right.
For about 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
They went off to do a tour. I think it was like a Falklands tour with the army.
Yeah.
Everything was going fine, and then David Van Day got absolutely bollocks one night, and they had a massive argument. Then he found out that Bobby G had been invited to a meal as Bucks Fizz, and they hadn't invited him. All this kind of stuff. So when they got back to the UK, David Van Day was like, "I'm not having anything to do with it. I'm leaving, but you're going to have to pay me for all the gigs that we had penciled in."
Right.
And Bobby G was like, "No, I'm not doing that." So
they took it to court, did they?
So David Van Day goes off, and then he convinces Mike Nolan, the other guy from Bucks Fizz, to come out of retirement and join a new Bucks Fizz with him.
Right.
so
he's been in both iterations of Bucks Fizz.
Well, he's been in a Bucks Fizz with Bobby G.
Yeah.
Bobby G's still doing Bucks Fizz at this point, and then David Van Day's version comes out. They re-record "Making Your Mind Up." This time, rather than ripping the dresses off, they rip off the tops, and it's like scantily. Oh, it's just awful. And then Bobby G tries to take out the copyright or the trademark. It ends up going to court. I think David Van Day wins, but then Mike Nolan calls up Bobby G and says, "I don't want to do it anymore."
Yeah.
And so "You can have the name." And then David Van Day carries on.
Yeah.
With no original members of Bucks Fizz.
Mm-hmm.
I've no idea who owns the name now. And now since then we've got Cheryl Baker and the other lady,
the Fizz,
going out as the Fizz.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mike Nolan and Bobby G are still alive, but anyway,
that's a different band.
It's a complete. I mean, the whole thing is you could have a whole TV series about it. It's so funny, but again, David Van Day comes across quite badly in that, and I think it's a real shame because obviously there was some talent there, wasn't there?
He's a great singer. I said to you earlier on, didn't I? I watched the Trevor Horn concert which they did. I think it was like 2004, 2005 at Wembley Stadium, where he invited all of the bands that he'd famously worked with and produced, even people like Grace Jones and that came and turned up. So he had Pet Shop Boys on there, Frankie obviously, and Dollar came and they did. I think it was Handheld in black and white, and both of them were brilliant.
That's a good song.
Incredible. Yeah, well, yeah.
That is a really good song. It was much better than I thought it'd be. Actually, it's actually very. The production's very, very now. Actually, you can hear a lot of bands like Tame Impala and these kind of more electronic modern bands with that kind of real sparkly power pop. What would you call it?
Well, it was like future pop back then.
Yeah, future pop.
It was the sound of with the Fairlight. It was the sound of the future.
Yeah,
the kind of instrumentation.
Kind of what Roxy Music were doing.
Yeah.
In the 80s.
But not as expensive as what Roxy were doing. Talking about things that were expensive. So this is Teresa's solo album.
Oh wow!
The Big Kiss, which I picked up.
What year was that then?
As well. So this is 86, I think. 85.
So this is after she's left.
After this is 80. This is the last Dollar one, and then it all went tits up after.
Good looking girl, isn't
she? Yeah. Very sort of Wendy James Transvision vamp kind of.
Yes.
But this album, I remember reading about it. Probably not at the time, because I would have been quite young. But at some point, a long time ago, it cost like £500,000 to make.
Really?
Which, back then, even now it's a lot of money, but back then was a hell of a lot of money.
Who put that money up?
MCA.
Wow.
It was on MCA.
Is it good?
It's got its moments. The title track's brilliant. The Big Kiss. There's a funky music video for it. Whether it's £500,000 worth of album, I don't know. But I enjoy it.
Cool.
So that's what she did, and then they got back together again, as we said, sort of for reality TV a bit in the 2000s. Teresa did tour as Teresa Bizarre's Dollar last year in this country, playing a few sort of theatre-sized venues.
But nothing to do with David.
A guy who actually had been in, I can't remember his name, a younger guy. Nothing to do with David, no. Stephen Fox, I think his name might be. He'd been in an iteration of Bucks Fizz at some point as well, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my
but he's
God.
obviously a bit younger. Teresa's now like in her 60s.
Yes.
And he's a bit younger, so
she comes across really well. I've seen some interviews with her, and she seems very knowledgeable.
Yeah. She did a whole load of press for that tour last year, and I remember she's cropping up on loads of stuff. I follow her on Facebook, and she was doing interviews for like the BBC morning show. She was on GB News. She was, in all the papers. So they really tried. But I remember looking to see if tickets were available, and most of the seats were still available in a few venues. So I don't know how well it sold. I didn't get to go in the end. I was going to go, but we didn't go in the end, which is a bit of a shame. So apparently I've seen some footage of it, and they filmed it for a DVD, and apparently it was quite good from what I saw.
So as much as Dollar, maybe more specifically David Van Day, has become a bit of a meme in and of itself.
Yeah, he's it's a bit diva, isn't he? So he's got that kind of reputation.
But having said that, and when you mentioned this is the record I want to do, I was like, oh my god, Dollar! I actually really enjoyed listening to that.
Well, good.
I think it's a top-heavy album. I think the first half's.
Speaking of the tracks which aren't, Trevor Horn, Pink and Blue again, which is I think is probably the best one, and I've read an interview with Teresa where she said that was her favourite track on this album as well, other than the ones that Trevor Horn did. And that's on side one. That's like track 4, isn't it? So yeah, it is a hugely top-heavy album. It does peter out. Some of these at the end are not.
So it wasn't a massively successful album. I know the singles were obviously they did very well for themselves.
Yeah.
But they were never really a successful albums band, were they, Dollar?
No, this was probably the most successful one, but it didn't. I think it was a top 20 album.
So was this the last proper album they did?
This is the last proper album they did.
So when they did that Ola Moore track later on in the decade, there was no album.
Just a single,
right?
Yeah. So the guy that probably had the most success out of all of this was Trevor Horn, because after hearing this, ABC got in touch and said, come and produce our album, our next album, which ended up being The Next Kind of Love, which is one of the best albums of the 80s.
Great album, though.
So they heard the stuff he did for Dollar. I mean, he says that in the book as well. They heard the stuff that he recorded and said, come and do.
It's funny, isn't it, how things work around like that.
And then this album is... Any connoisseur of 80s pop is going to have this in their top 10, aren't they?
And any connoisseur of 80s pop will want the 12-inch singles as well.
Oh yeah,
because they were
fantastic.
Absolutely brilliant. The extended mixes they did on all those songs, like The Look of Love. The extended mix, I used to play it there when I did the Cheese Night at Moles years back. There was a 10-minute version, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, they're great. And Trevor Horn, extended mixes and stuff. This was the band for that, and this I think is the thing that Trevor's best known for when it comes to production. Probably one of the most influential pop albums of the 80s, I'd say. And all the 12-inch versions of these songs are just outstanding.
Brilliant.
So without Dollar, we probably wouldn't have got to Next Kind of Love and Pleasure Dome by Frankie.
Yeah, a newfound respect.
How much has got to do with actual Dollar is another thing.
So yeah, I'd say for an album less than £5, I think you did all right then.
Yeah, so not a bad start to the series.
Yeah, what are you enjoying the beer, Tim?
The beer's nice. Yeah, it's not something I would usually choose, but yeah, not bad.